Well, good afternoon. Now, in the previous class, we were talking about ethics and integrity. Some basic idea about ethics we had seen that ethics and science, or science and morality, ethics and integrity, etc. Now, next important topic that we will talk about now is, write down further, change the paragraph. Next topic, subdivisions of ethics. Subdivisions of ethics. So there was a question. Sir, you said that ethical values always same. Then why UCC try to bring under fundamental rights this time, but it keeps under DPSP in 1950s? Is it not a change in ethical values, Biswajit? No, I did not say that ethical values do not change. Ethical values keep on changing all the time. That we will discuss in more detail in maybe this class or next one. So I did not say that ethical values do not change. I simply say that there are some ethical values which determine our action, which may change, which may not change. We'll discuss that later. Next question, pin 2. Sir, could you please describe the term integrity again with the help of some day-to-day examples, as I did not get it that time. Pin 2, simple example is that day-to-day example, that integrity, whenever you do something, it is determined by what your ideal self tells you to do. That suppose, for example, your real self today is real self we talked about, difference between the two. So your real self today is that you are a student. Now tomorrow your ideal self is that you want to become an IAS officer tomorrow. So that your integrity means that you have to work in such a manner that you move towards becoming your ideal self. So if you study well, then you are having integrity. Or once you become a civil servant, then you are a normal person, and your ideal self is that you should not take a bribe. You should not engage in a corrupt action. So in this case, your ideal self should determine whether your real self, whether you accept bribe or gift or not from somebody. So any action, your ideal self tells you what you should do, and your real self is what you really are. So both of them are same. What you do and what whether you accept a favor or not as a civil servant, and your ideal self tells you that not to accept that favor, are the two consistent with each other or not. That is what integrity essentially is. Though not worry about it, we will keep on talking about these ideas throughout the course. Today, I am just giving you you can say, a brief overview of the things that we will be discussing later on. So, simple thing that you can remember here, we will discuss that in much detail later on, that what you do and what you think you should be doing, are they same or not? What you do is that you study, and what you should do is to study to achieve your ideal self. Both of them are same, then your integrity is there. But if your ideal self tells you study, but you are not studying, then that will be a lack of integrity maybe. That is what it can be. Now, next important topic, subdivisions of ethics. Write down further. There are three subdivisions of ethics. There are three subdivisions of ethics. Now, the idea what we are going to talk about now is that whenever we study some subject in a systematic manner, that one way to study is to divide that subject into its categories, into subdivisions. That allows us to study in a more systematic manner. So in ethics also, when we study ethics, then we divide ethics into three subdivisions. That gives us a more systematic way to approach and develop the ethical system. So there are three subdivisions that we often talk about in study of ethics. First one is, write down, descriptive morality. First one is descriptive morality. Now write down firstly in this. In this we try to find out the actual decision that people take. We try to find out the actual decision that people take when they face some ethical dilemma. Actual decision that people take when they face some ethical dilemma. It is the collection of facts about ethics. It is the collection of facts about ethics. Now, this is what we call descriptive morality. So, idea of descriptive morality is that, as the name itself tells us, in this we try to describe the morality of the people. It is about the fact, about the moral question that people often answer. Suppose, for example, we all know that our ideas of right and wrong differ significantly from each other. As I told you in the previous class also, that what is right for me, different people have different ideas of right and wrong. So, in this case, we try to suppose what is right for me, it can become wrong for you, or vice versa, as we have talked about earlier. What is right for a Hindu may be wrong for a Muslim, or vice versa. What is right in India may be wrong in America. So, at different places, you know that right and wrong often differ. For different people also, right and wrong often differ. In descriptive morality, so there is a significant amount of diversity that exists among the people about the question of morality. So, in descriptive morality, we try to find out how much diversity exists among the people about the question of morality, right and wrong. How do we do descriptive morality? In descriptive morality, we go to people and we ask people that we present people with some moral question, some moral dilemma, and we ask them that imagine yourself into that moral dilemma. I will give you an example of that shortly. So, we ask people that imagine yourself in that particular situation. If you find yourself in that particular situation, then how would you respond? And whatever is your answer is what we call the descriptive morality. It is the actual answer that people give about the questions of morality. And since it is about fact or description, then remember it is not done by the philosophers. Because description or fact is not the domain of philosophy or the ethics as such. It is mostly done by whom? The scientist. It is domain of science. So, descriptive morality is often done by the scientists, like for example, anthropologist, sociologist, psychologist, ethnographer, etc. So, anthropologists, for example, they go to the tribal society and they try to find out how do tribal people make decisions about their life. Sociologists do the same with the more modern society, contemporary society, or the psychologists do the same with individual in isolation. So, psychologists go to each individual and ask them that how do you decide about morality or moral question. So, they go to the people, they do many different things like interview, survey, poll, opinion poll, observation, etc. So, they observe people, they interview people and they try to find out how people often take decisions about their life. Result of that is what we call the descriptive morality. So, it is the beginning of our systematic study of ethics, and then after we collect fact, and then after we go to the second part of our moral study. Write down further. Second one, ethical theory or moral philosophy. Ethical theory or moral philosophy. Ethical theory or moral philosophy. Write down. In this, we try to find out In this we try to find out the reason behind people's moral decision. And based on that we try to develop a systematic and consistent theory of ethics. So that is what we actually do in the moral philosophy. What we do in that case, that after collecting the fact, we go beyond the fact. And then we try to find out that why people take decisions like that. So if people do something, then why do they do that? And on the basis of that understanding, what we do, we try to develop a systematic theory of ethics that can help us to decide, which we'll talk about in the third one. A good theory, as we will see shortly, should have two important characteristics. First of all, a good theory must be general. What does that mean? It means that a good theory must not be dependent on the fact. It may come out of the fact, but it must be independent of the fact. It must be general idea rather than a specific and fact-based theory in a way. As we will see, give you some example of that shortly. But more importantly, a good theory must be as universal as possible. A good theory must be as universal as possible. So suppose, for example, I develop a theory of ethics that can guide you about what is right and wrong in a classroom like this, but not in the office outside or market outside, then that will be a bad theory. If a theory can tell you what is right in India but not in America, well, that will be a bad theory. A theory that can tell you what is right for a Hindu but wrong not for a Muslim, that will be a bad theory. A theory that can tell you what is right today but not tomorrow would be a bad theory. But suppose, for example, we develop a theory that can tell you what is right and wrong in the classroom here, in the office outside, in the market outside again, in India, in China, in America, for a Hindu, for a Muslim, Christian, today, yesterday, 100 years ago or 100 years later, then we will say that is a grand theory, very good theory, because it is sort of universal theory. It can help us about morality in every possible situation. So a good theory must be as universal as it possibly can be. So that is the ultimate purpose of ethics, to develop a more universal theory, a general that is simpler, more universal that is more difficult. But that is what is our aim, that is what is our purpose in ethics in general. That is what we try to do in the ethical theory. Now before we go to the third part, let us take one example. As I told you earlier, in ethics you can say we will talk about many examples, many questions here, problems here. Each problem that we are going to discuss now onwards will be a potential case study. So that is one thing there. So we will start with the first problem. Each of these problems, remember, we'll keep on talking about that again and again, exploring them throughout the course as we proceed. So let's talk about the first problem, first case study maybe. Now this problem that I am going to talk about next is a very famous problem in the field of philosophy. First time this problem was developed by a philosopher called Philip Foot in 1960s, early 60s, but then after it has become a very popular problem. Every good book of ethics you can find this problem somewhere or the other. So let's talk about this problem. What is that problem and how can we understand the three subdivisions of ethics? Now this problem that I am going to talk about in philosophy, this problem is known as the trolley problem. Trolley problem. Now trolley problem is something like this. Suppose, for example, there is a railway track in a mountainous slope, and suppose on this track a trolley is moving at a very high speed, and suppose you are the driver of the trolley. So the problem is that you are the driver of a trolley moving at a very high speed on a mountainous slope in a way, and when your trolley is at this point, suddenly you realize that on this point on the track 5 people are standing there, and if the trolley goes like this, then these 5 people will be killed, of course, which we do not want. So in order to save the life of these 5 people, you try to stop the, you can say you apply the brake on your trolley to stop it. But the moment you try to apply a brake on the trolley, suddenly you realize that the brake of the trolley has failed. Now you cannot stop the trolley. Trolley is moving at a very high speed. It is, and within a moment or so, it is going to kill these 5 people, and brake has failed. You cannot stop the trolley. Now you, of course, you don't want to kill these 5 people. So you start thinking that if I cannot stop the trolley, then can I do something else to save the life of these 5 people? You start looking at what can be done, what else can be done, what else. You start looking here and there to find a way out, and suddenly you find a way. That suddenly you realize that at this point there is a side track. And now there is a real possibility that you can take a right turn. If you take a right turn, then you can save the life of 5 people, but there is a problem that on this track, side track here, one person is standing, he will be killed. Now there is a dilemma. If you go straight, then nothing will happen to that one person, but these 5 people will be killed. And if you take a right turn, then you can save the life of these 5 people, but that one person unfortunately will be killed. Now, if these two are the only 2 choices in front of you, there is no third choice. Don't try to be more imaginative. Sir, I will do this also, I will do that also. Nothing else is possible. Only these 3 things are, only these 2 things are possible. Don't make any assumption. I will tell you after 4 days or 5 days maybe that how to make assumptions in ethics. So till that class, no assumptions are allowed. You have to answer only and only on the basis of fact that is given to you. No maybe, no nothing is there. So after 5-6 days, I will tell you that how assumption can be made. It is important to make assumptions sometimes in ethics, but how there is a principle of that, there is a rule for that. We will talk about that. So if these are the only 2 choices in front of you, there is no third choice, then in this case, what would you do? Well, in this case, perhaps majority of you will decide that you will take a right turn. Our research that we have done, well, this research tells us that around 70% of the people in the world, 70% of the people who have been studied, they decide to take a right turn. 30% people decide to go straight. 30% people. In my classroom, almost 90, I have a different data. In my classroom, almost 95% of my students who attend the classroom physically, well, they decide to take a right turn. Just not more than 5% of students say that they will go straight. I hope that similar possibility will be there, similar percentage might be there in this online class as well. So 70% people on an average in the whole world, they prefer to take a right turn. Now, if you are among those people that, now in this case, what we have done till now, just now, is called descriptive morality. In this case, what did I do? I presented you with a problem, that there is a problem to go straight or to take a right turn. 2 choices are there in front of you. And I ask you in this situation, what would you do? And all of you had the answer ready in your mind. Remember, ethics is not something that we need to teach. Ethics is somewhere in your mind itself. So you already know the answer. You don't have to attend a classroom to get an answer where a teacher can tell you, sir, what is right. So you all know the answer. You have some ready-made answer in your mind. So what we have done here is called descriptive morality. We simply describe your morality by presenting you with a problem. Now, that is descriptive morality. Now, if you are the ones, those people who decide to take a right turn, then I ask you the next question, that why did you decide to take a right turn? What would be your answer? Your answer may be that, well, killing a person is wrong, we agree with that, but in some special circumstances, it may be right. It is right to kill one person in order to save the life of 5 people. That might be your justification for that. Now, this is called ethical theory. So, in this case, you can say, you say that killing is wrong, but in some special circumstances it may be right to kill one person if that saves the life of 5 people. So in this case you are killing one person, but you justify the killing of one person by saying that by killing one person we have been able to save the life of 5 people. Remember, ethics is not about explanation, ethics is about justification. So in this case you justify your act of killing one person by saying that you have been able to save the life of 5. So that is what we call the ethical theory. So this is ethical theory, second important thing. Now ethical theory, this ethical theory that we have discussed here, tomorrow we will discuss in more detail about what exactly that theory is. But this ethical theory that we have seen here is a general theory. Why it is a general theory? Because this theory does not contain any fact of the matter. It does not talk about a trolley, failure of the brake, side track state. It just talks about general idea that, well, one person can be killed perhaps in order to save the life of 5 people. So that is what we call the theory, a general theory. It should not remain that, okay, in a trolley, well, you take a right turn in order to kill, you can say, in order to save the life of 5 people. No, you don't talk about the trolley, you don't talk about the side track, you do not talk about the failure of the brake. You simply talk about a general idea that it is right to kill one person in order to save the life of 5 people. That is called ethical theory. Now, I will come back to this question once again, trolley problem, it's not over. So, we will talk about trolley problem further and that theory further. But before that, let us come to the third part of your subdivision of ethics. Write down further. We will come back to trolley problem once again shortly. But before that, write down third one, applied ethics. Applied ethics. Now, write down in this one. In this, we try to apply, the ethical theory in new and more difficult situations. In new and more difficult situations, to check its validity. We also use, write down further, we also use the ethical theory to clarify our choices. We also use the ethical theory to clarify our choices about the more controversial ethical issues of our time. So, that is what we do in applied ethics. In applied ethics, we do two things as we have written. First important thing that we do in applied ethics is that we use the theory that we had developed earlier in new situation, more difficult situation, more complicated situation, to see that how valid, how applicable this theory is, number one. But more importantly, we use the ethical theory to clarify our choices about the more controversial ethical issues of our time, and that is important. The idea here is that if you look at, you can say, ethics, then you can appreciate that ethics is a highly controversial topic. That different, as we have seen a number of times, that ethics is highly controversial in the sense that different people, different society at different time have many controversies about ethics, that different people think differently about ethics, and that different ideas about ethics often creates controversies, ethical controversies, and these ethical controversies keep on changing with the time also. What was ethically controversial yesterday may not remain controversial today. What is controversial today may not remain controversial tomorrow. So ethical controversies keep on changing on the basis of time. So for example, 300 years ago in India, sati was a controversial issue. Because some people thought that sati is right and some people thought that sati is wrong. There was a controversy about that, but there was a controversy, but today that controversy has long been resolved. Today there is no controversy about sati. All of us agree that sati was wrong. So that controversy has long been resolved. 200 years ago in America, slavery was a controversial issue. In Europe, slavery was a controversial issue. Some people thought that slavery is right and some people thought that slavery is wrong. So there was a controversy about that. Today, you can say that controversy has long been resolved. 100 years ago in India, untouchability was a controversial issue. Because some people thought that untouchability is right and some people thought that it is wrong. But today that controversy has long been resolved. So today we can say that some people may practice untouchability in their private life sometimes, but in public life we often consider that untouchability is wrong. So idea is that these were the past controversies and there may be some future controversy. There are some present controversy. So ethical controversies keep on changing on the basis of time, on the basis of age, on the basis of the society in a way. So the idea of applied ethics is that in applied ethics, the ethical theory that we had developed earlier should help us to understand what these controversies are. Why do people think about right and wrong in such cases? So that is an important part of ethical understanding. Now let us talk about briefly what are some of the most important ethical controversies of our time, present time. So let's talk about some of them. It will help you to understand how is it that we are going to proceed in our class throughout the next few days. So let's talk about some of the present moral controversies. Now first, a very important controversy that we are facing in today's time, which we are trying to solve, is the question of suicide. Suicide. Now, what is a controversy about suicide? The main controversy about suicide is that in our society today, we often talk about many important rights, like fundamental rights, for example. We talk about rights. Now, whenever we talk about rights, then one very important thing about right that we need to understand is that every right, by definition, includes its negation as well. Every right includes its negation as well, its opposition as well, its absence as well. So, for example, I have a free right to freedom of expression, Article 19(1)(a). So, I have a right to freedom of expression which allows me to speak anything that I want. But right to freedom of expression also can say allow me not to speak anything that I do not want. So, right to free speech must also remain right to be silent. So, just because I have a right to speech does not mean that somebody can force me to speak something against my will. So, right remains, nobody can force me to speak anything, not even say, now what is that? Well, it is Bharat Mata Ki Jai, not even that. You know, a few years ago there was a controversy in India that some people said that, well, in a country like India, saying Bharat Mata Ki Jai is non-negotiable. Now, we will say here that no, it is negotiable. That my constitution gives me right not to say it. If you want to say Bharat Mata Ki Jai, it's your choice, you can do that. But if I do not want to say, then it's my choice, equally important. So, nobody can force me to speak. My constitution gives me that right. So, that is your right. So, right, nobody can force me to speak something that I do not want to. I want to remain silent, that's my right. So, right to expression, right to speech also includes right to remain silent. Similarly, right to work, we have. And right to work also includes right not to work. Just because I have a right to work, does it mean that government can force me to work and earn money and lead a good life? Of course not. If I do not want to work and I want to lead a miserable life, for example, then well, that's my choice. So, nobody can force me to work also. So, right to work includes right to not work as well. I have a right to follow a religion, but I have right, equally importantly, I have right not to follow a religion as well. Right to become a atheist is an equally important part of right to religion. So every right that we talk about, it includes its negation also, its absence also. But in this definition of right, there is one right which is often considered as an exceptional right. And what is that? That is the right to life. So right to life is the only right that does not include its negation. We have a right to life, but we do not have a right to death. On that ground, that in most of the countries in the world, everywhere in the world, people often consider suicide as a immoral act, and in most of the countries in the world, it is criminal act also. So suicide, if you look at suicide, then suicide is perhaps the very interesting crime. Because as far as I know the law, suicide is the only crime in which the failure to commit a wrong act, a crime, is a crime. In all other crime, when you commit a crime and if you succeed, then only you are a criminal. But in the case of suicide, if somebody wants to commit a crime, suicide, and he succeeds in that, there is no crime, he is gone. It becomes a crime only when the person fails to commit that. So it is the only crime in which failure to commit a crime is a crime. And I remember one interesting information about that in Great Britain, England, suicide was decriminalized in 1965. But before that, do you know what was the maximum punishment for suicide in Britain? Well, it was death penalty, capital punishment. Well, I am not joking again. It appears to be funny, but well, it was true. I don't know who makes such a law, but that law did exist in Britain at that point of time. So if a person tries to commit suicide and if he fails in that, then a state will help him to die in that case. So I don't know who makes such funny law, but this law was still there. So the idea is that in most of the countries in the world, suicide is considered to be a crime. It is the exceptional right to life. But many people say, we will talk about these people a few days later, who are these people and why do they say so. There are many people who believe that no, right to life should also not be an exceptional right. It must be like any other right. And on that ground, they say that people should have a right to commit suicide also, nobody should prevent them. So if I want to commit suicide or if somebody wants to commit suicide, then we should not prevent that person, we should allow that person, we should help that person maybe, if we want. So this is what some people say. Why and who are these people? We'll talk about a few days later. But this is one important controversy about suicide, that should suicide be a crime or not? Should right to life will be like any other right or should it remain an exceptional right? That is one important question that we need to ask, and ethics should help us to understand that. Another important issue related to suicide is the case of euthanasia. A lot of debate had been going on about euthanasia in our country for the last few, you can say, decades and all, particularly about the case of people like Aruna Schonborg. You must have heard about her case. So Aruna Schonborg was a nurse in a hospital in Mumbai and she was raped by somebody in a very brutal manner. So brutal it was that this lady, well, lost her mind again. So she became brain dead. Body was alive, but brain was dead. And for the next 40 years after that, she was kept on ventilators and medical support by giving artificial food, for example, and all those things. Her brain was dead, but her body was alive, and body was kept alive for the next 40 years in the same hospital, taken care of by the nurses of that hospital there, her colleagues. Now the question in that case, many people demanded that a person like her should be allowed to die. Why are you making her to live when her mind is totally dead? So that would be case of euthanasia. Euthanasia, you know that there are two types of euthanasia we talk about. The passive euthanasia and the active euthanasia. So in passive euthanasia, Aruna Schonborg's case was the passive euthanasia. So in that case, you know that in passive euthanasia, the person is terminally ill, he is put on medical support like ventilator, etc. and the person is not going to survive for long. So in such a case, a person may be going through a very painful condition perhaps. Now many people say that such a person must be allowed to die rather than to be kept alive for long. So let us remove the medical support like ventilator and let the person die. That is the case of passive euthanasia. You do not kill a person, you simply remove the medical support and let the person die passively. Active euthanasia, on the other hand, is a condition in which the person is suffering from a terminal disease. There is no chance of survival. The person will die maybe a week later, a month later, but during this period, the person is not on medical support. But during this period, the person will be in a very bad condition of his life. So extremely, you can say, painful condition and all. Somebody like Anand in that film, Anand film, I hope that some of you may have watched that film, Hrishikesh Mukherjee's film, Anand, Babu Moshai, Amitabh Bachchan, Rajesh Khanna. So in that film, Rajesh role player Anand was suffering from a terminal disease, a lymphosarcoma of the intestine. And he would die 3 months later. He handled that 3 months more comfortably maybe, but happily. But imagine our life again, that somebody tells us, we all know that we are going to die someday or the other. But suppose, for example, somebody tells us the date of our death, that 2 months later you are going to die, how difficult these 2 months will be for us. So, suppose, for example, that person is going through such a painful condition, such a strong agony. Now, in this case, the person decides, no, I don't want to linger my life like this, I want to die. This person goes to a doctor and doctor gives him some lethal injection, for example, in order to make him die. This is called active euthanasia. So, in this case, the doctor medically assisted death. When doctors assist the person, for example, by giving a lethal injection in his death, that is called active euthanasia. So, this word euthanasia, if you look at it, it has been derived from two words, eu and thanatos. Both of them are the Greek word. Eu means good and thanatos means death. So, it is a good death. Death is normally bad, but in some condition, death can be good for the person who dies. So, can we allow the person to die for the sake of the good of the person? That is an important moral question. Recently, you know, Government of India in a case heard by Supreme Court has agreed that we will allow the passive euthanasia, but active euthanasia will not be allowed in India. Now, again the question comes up that what is the difference, moral difference between active and passive euthanasia? Why is it that some people think that passive euthanasia may be justified, active may not be? So, that is an important moral question that ethics must help us to somehow understand. So, that is the controversy. Another controversy, highly controversial issue in our modern time is the case of, say, sale of organ. Sale of organ. The idea here is that in our country, you know, everywhere else in the world, donation of organ is allowed, but sale of organ is banned. That is a moral question that where lots of controversy has. Every year you can find some big organ donation racket, kidney racket, for example, where people sell and purchase the organ in black market maybe. So, a lot of controversy has been there. So, donation of organ is allowed, but sale of organ is wrong. Should we be allowed to sell our organ like kidney, for example? Suppose, for example, I want to purchase a big car for myself. Suppose, for example, Mercedes and Audi and Jaguar, for example, but I don't have 50 lakh rupees, 80 lakh rupees for that, but I have a spare kidney in my body. We all have a spare kidney. So suppose a rich person comes to me and he tells me, give me one of your kidney and I'll give you 80 lakh rupees for that. And if I sell one of my kidney in order to purchase a car or an apartment, will that be the right thing to do? Well, many students in my class say, sir, no, sir, it will be wrong. But if you say no, then, well, who are you to say no about it? It's my kidney, it's my body. Should I not be the authority to decide? That is where the question comes up. Who will decide whether it is right or wrong? You know, it was a real case. In fact, a few years ago, it actually happened in America. There was a young teenage boy was there. He sold one of his kidney in order to purchase an iPhone. Just think of it. In order to purchase an iPhone, he sold one of his kidney. And very unfortunately, a few months later, a year later, his second kidney, only other kidney that was left, well, it also developed some infection. And doctors say that he might not survive at all after that. Very tragic case. I don't know what happened after that because it was not further. I could not follow this up in newspapers and all. But that was a controversial issue again. So the question is that should people be allowed to sell their organ or not? Suppose for example, if I think of it, that is the moral question. Suppose for example, if I donate my kidney to somebody who is dying because of a kidney failure, then that is right. People will call me a great person, I saved somebody's life. But the moment I take money from that person in return, then that becomes wrong. That becomes sale. What is wrong with the money? If I do not take the money, the same act is right. And the moment I take the money in return, then that will become wrong. What is wrong with the money? That is an important question. So, why is it that some moral philosophers are so skeptical about the money? What are those things in the life which cannot be subjected to market exchange? Money. So, if I sell my pen, for example, to you in 20 rupees, then that is right, nothing is wrong. But if I sell my kidney to somebody, then that becomes wrong. Why is it that sale of a pen is right and sale of a kidney is wrong? That is an important question that somehow we have to answer. What is wrong in the money? Why is it wrong in the money? What are those things in the life which cannot be subjected to the market exchange, and why so? So, ethics somehow should help us to understand that as well. That is the third thing. Other important question where the ethical issue is similar is the case of surrogacy. Case of surrogacy. Now, surrogacy, was not a controversial issue 20 years ago. It was not an issue because it was medically impossible. But today it is not only possible, but it is very easy to do that. So, for the last few decades, you can see surrogacy has become a highly controversial topic. In India, for example, for the last many decades rather, there is no regulation, no clear-cut regulation about surrogacy was there. And because of that, a large number of people from throughout the world, America, Europe, particularly from Israel, they used to come to India in search of a surrogate mother. Surat in Gujarat is often known as the surrogacy capital of the world. So, that is there. So, and not much regulation were there. Many such controversial cases have happened. There is a journalist and author called Geeta Hariharan. She had written done lots of research on surrogacy cases in India. She had written a book also called Baby Makers. And she often writes in the newspapers also about surrogacy related issues. She has talked about many such cases that suppose for example, there is an Israeli couple that they come to India sometimes in search of a surrogate mother. They contract a woman to become a surrogate mother. Now this lady is taken to Nepal where surrogacy is done. And then after registration is done, and then after this lady is brought to India in search of better medical care. So, because in India medical care is much better than that in Nepal. 9 months this lady spends in India, and just before the birth of the child, the lady goes to Nepal again so that she can give birth to the child in Nepal. Reason is that the citizenship law of Nepal is much simpler than that of India. Paperwork, because after the birth of the child, well, citizenship becomes an issue, and citizenship law in India is more complicated, more paperwork is required, more complication happens. Now, this raises many important questions that which citizen the child will be, which country the child will be a citizen of, Indian citizen, Nepalese or Israeli for example. What are the rights of the child? What are the rights of the surrogate mother? What are the rights of the biological parents? So, these often create a lots of controversial questions here. A few years ago there was a film also that has come. So, you must have, some of you may have seen that film about surrogacy, Mimi. So, that is also a beautiful film. I may suggest you, if you have not watched that film, then I may suggest you to watch that film if you can. It is available on social media, in the OTT channels and all. So, this film can be a case study in your UPSC exam. They can tell you the story of that film in that case study, and they can ask you that what are the ethical issues involved in that this case for all the stakeholders like Mimi, the girl, the American couple, biological parents, doctors who did the surrogacy, and the mediator between the two, the driver, role played by Pankaj Tripathi in that case. So, what are the right and wrong for these people? That is an important thing that we have to ask and answer. Now, recently, Government of India had actually, Parliament has passed a law last year, December, in which they have, the law tells now in India that we have is that in some special cases, altruistic surrogacy will be allowed. but commercial surrogacy in India is proposed to be completely banned. Now here again the same question comes up, that morally speaking, what is the difference between altruistic surrogacy and the commercial surrogacy? Suppose for example, well, there is a woman who becomes a surrogate mother by her altruistic choice, then after it is right, but the moment she takes money in return, then that becomes commercial surrogacy, and that will become wrong. Again, same question, what is wrong with the money? Why is it that money is such a controversial question? Why is that some moral philosophers are so worried about the money? So that is an important question that ethics should help us to understand. Surrogacy is a highly controversial issue in that sense. Another important controversy that we face today is the case of, say, abortion. About abortion also, a lot of controversy has been going on in our country, all of you may be aware, but in America particularly after that Supreme Court judgment in which Roe versus Wade judgment was reversed in America. In India also we have a very strict abortion law, MTP Act, Medical Termination of Pregnancy Act of 1971. Under that law, all of you may be aware that till 20 weeks of pregnancy in India, under original law, till 20 weeks of pregnancy, abortion was allowed under two conditions. Condition number one, when the fetus has some genetic abnormality, and condition two, when there is a threat to the life of the mother. And when these two conditions are verified by, certified by two independent doctors, then till 20 weeks of pregnancy, abortion was allowed. But after 20 weeks of pregnancy, abortion was completely banned, except in the case when Supreme Court makes an intervention, court order. And because of that, many such controversial and tragic cases have emerged. Again, a few years ago, for example, in Delhi, there was a case, you may have heard about such cases, that there was a case that there was a young girl was there, 14, 15 years of age. She was raped by somebody and she became pregnant, and she did not know, nobody knew that she is pregnant. When it was discovered that she is pregnant, then, well, 20 weeks had already passed. And after that, well, they went to court, but court did not allow the against abortion. And in 15 years of age, this young girl became a mother. Now that raises many controversial and tragic questions here, that in this case, what are the rights of that fetus child maybe, what rights of this girl now who is a mother, what are the, how can you deal with the rapist, for example, and other family members, etc. So it raises many important questions. Recently, last year, the Parliament has amended the FTP Act. You may have heard about that. I mentioned that in previous class also. The Parliament has amended the MTP Act, under which the 20 weeks of pregnancy has been increased to 24 weeks. Now 24 weeks, till 24 weeks of pregnancy, well, abortion is normally allowed, and conditions also have been increased, that not only genetic abnormality and the life of the mother, but also on the ground of rape or incest, or many other grounds are there on which abortion has been allowed. But that also raises many important questions. So that is an important controversy, because some people are there who believe that no, there is nothing wrong in abortion, you must allow abortion completely, and there should not be any restriction on abortion at all. Similarly, in the case of sale of organ also, there are many people who believe that there is nothing wrong in the sale of organ. Who are those people? And we will talk about them later on. They believe that there is nothing wrong in the sale of organ. There should be a market in the human organ, they say. So similarly, you can say abortion also, some people think that there is nothing wrong in abortion. Abortion must be allowed in a, you can say, normal manner. That is a controversy here. Other important controversy, if you look at it, is the case of, say, civil disobedience. That can be one important controversy further. Civil disobedience, what is that? It means, suppose something like, suppose for example, if there is a law, and suppose if I think that the law is unethical, then to what extent do I have right or duty to violate that law? Gandhi said, you must have heard about that, that Gandhi said that if the law is unethical, then it is our moral duty to violate that law. You must violate that law, and this is what he did. He thought himself that SOT law is unethical, so he violated the SOT law. That's what civil disobedience movement was all about. So if the law is unethical, then it's our duty to violate that law. This is what he said. Now, idea question here is that this is where the moral controversy comes up, that Gandhi also violated a law and a criminal also violates the law. Now, what is the difference between Gandhi's violation and a criminal's violation? Under what condition the violation of a law becomes civil disobedience, and when does it become crime? Ethics somehow should help us to understand that also. In abortion case, if you look at it again, one case I remember which I will mention in my later class also, because one very highly controversial case about abortion has happened a few years ago. I hope that some of you may remember that. It happened in Ireland and it concerned an Indian lady. Because of that, a lot of debate had gone on about that case in India, abortion case. That there was an Indian lady in Ireland, her name was Savita, and she was pregnant in Ireland, and there was some complication in her pregnancy. The doctor said that complication was so bad that in order to save the life of the lady, abortion must be done. Otherwise, there was a threat to the life of the lady. But Savita, that abortion was illegal in Ireland, and because of that, the abortion was not done. Doctors did not do the abortion. Not only that, the authorities in Ireland prevented her from leaving Ireland, because they feared that if she leaves Ireland, she goes outside somewhere, then she might get abortion done. And because of that, ultimately this lady died. After death of that lady, a lot of controversy happened in Ireland, in India also. Diplomatic question also came up because she was prevented to leave Ireland also because of that. So that again became a highly controversial issue here. So these are the controversial cases. Civil disobedience is another one. Other one, if you look at it, then prostitution, is that right or wrong? Or homosexuality, for example, Section 377 of the IPC that was annulled by the Supreme Court a few years ago, or adultery, Section 497 of IPC that was further annulled by Supreme Court a few years ago, or a related concept like homosexuality, same-sex marriage, or sedition. To what extent should I be allowed to say something against the government in public? So, sedition, blasphemy. Should people be allowed to say something against a particular religion and all? Or many such other things are there. Things like you can say the cloning or genetic modification, genetically modified food, or the genetically modifying the fetus of a fetus to have a certain type of baby, or somebody has already talked about UCC, for example. So there are large number of other issues are there where lots of controversy has been there. So to what extent? Well, again remember one very important thing, that in these classes that we are going to have here, you may not get the final answer to these questions. Had it been so easy to get the final answer to these questions, then there will not be a controversy. They are controversy because answers are difficult. So our purpose here is not to get the final answer. Our purpose is to clarify our choice about the controversy that we are facing, so that we can make a more, you can say, Mrs. Chatterjee few days ago on biography realized about her. No, Mrs. Chatterjee was not about biography, about Ireland case. Mrs. Chatterjee was in Norway. That was another controversy, child's rights and all. So Mrs. Chatterjee and Norway, that was the case. A film also has been made more recently. Well, the idea here is that in these cases, ethics should help us to understand what is the problem in these cases. And we can understand both sides of the argument, why some people support these things, why some people oppose that. So it's not about getting final answer. It is more about, well, understanding various aspects of the situation so that we can arrive at a better answer ourselves. So this is what we do in the applied ethics. We try to use the ethical theory that we developed earlier to understand these moral controversies of our time, so that we can be more clear in our mind whenever a controversial issue comes up to us. If we can debate about it better, we can understand it better, we can arrive at a more informed decision, more informed conclusion. That is the purpose of the applied ethics. Now let's come back to this trolley problem and let us see that this theory that we had developed earlier, how good this theory is on the applied ethics, on the ground of applied ethics here. So let's talk about that. In order to understand applied ethics in this case, let us take a second variation of the trolley problem. The second variation of the trolley problem, this trolley problem has many variations, more than 15 variations I am aware of. Sir, is it not a crime by the government? They killed Savita instead knowing about the fact, Braja. Yes, many people will say so. But why it was prevented and why it is right, we will talk about that in later class. But yes, many people say it was crime by the government. That's why it became such an important, such a controversial issue. Well, coming back to this one, in order to understand applied ethics, let us take a second variation of the trolley problem. Trolley problem has more than 15 variations as I told you. I will not talk about all of them, but at least 2 or 3 I will talk about that will help you to understand how problematic or controversial ethics can possibly become. So let's talk about second variation of the trolley problem. Now, the second variation of the trolley problem, first change is that suppose there is no side track now. The trolley is going straight and it can only go straight. There is no way that the path of the trolley, the route of the trolley can be diverted. First change. Second change here is that you are not the driver of the trolley. Driver is somebody else. Now who are you? Well, you are a third person. Suppose for example there is a bridge here and you are standing on this bridge here. Suppose there is a bridge here and you are standing here. You are A. You are standing on the corner of a bridge and doing the sightseeing around. Now you see the trolley coming at a very high speed. You also see 5 people standing on the track. And looking at the driver of the trolley, the nervousness on his behavior, panic on his face, looking at all of that, suddenly you realize that the brake of the trolley has failed. So you know that trolley driver cannot stop the trolley now. He is as good as not there. This trolley is going to kill these 5 people, which you do not want. Of course, nobody wants to see 5 people killed in front of him. So you start thinking that if the trolley driver cannot do anything, then can I do something to save this 5 people's life? You start looking here and there, what can be done, what can be done, what can I do, what can I do? And suddenly you find a way. The way is that on this bridge here, suppose there is another person, B is standing, a tall, fat man. Now there is a choice in front of you. You can go behind that person, you can slightly push that person like this. This person will fall on the track. He will be killed, of course, one person dies here also, unfortunately, but he is fat enough that his body will stop the trolley. Now, if this is the only choice in front of you, suppose for example, you are you can say a very conscientious person, you think for a moment that you yourself will jump in front of the trolley to stop it. But you are a very thin person, your body is not big enough to stop the trolley. So, only way in front of you is that you can push that fat man. If you push him like this one, then he will fall on the track and he is fat enough that his body will stop the trolley. He will die, but you can still save the life of 5 people. You are killing one person, but still you are saving the life of 5 people. How many of you will do that? In this case, this percentage that I talked about, 70% and 30%, is totally reversed. So in this case, well, 70% of the people say that no, I cannot push the fat man. So I will let the trolley go rather than to push the fat man and all. Only 30% people agree to do that. In my classroom, the data is similar. 95% people will prefer not to push the fat man. Only 5%, 1 or 2 students in my class, mostly 3, 4, 5 maybe maximum. Well, never more than that. They agree, okay sir, I will push the fat man also here. Now, how many of you think that you will push the fat man? Majority of you, if my data is correct, my classroom is representative in that case, then majority of you will not do that. So, why not? If first case, if you are willing to kill one person to save the life of 5 people, why did you not do that in the second case? That is an important question that you need to ask and answer. In order to understand, some of you may still agree that you will push the fat man here. Now, if you agree to push that fat man, then, well, let us take a third variation of the trolley problem to see how complicated the ethics can sometimes become. Let's take a third, you can say, the variation of the trolley problem. The third variation of the trolley problem is something like this. Suppose, for example, forget about the trolley. Suppose you are a doctor, you have a nursing home, and in your nursing home one day there are 5 patients are there and they are on their deathbed. All of them have some organ failure. 2 people have kidney failure, 2 people have lungs failure, so something like this one. And situation is very bad. Only way to, they are on the deathbed, only way to save their life is to do some organ transplantation. And situation is so bad that you must do the operation in the next 1 hour. If you are not able to do that, then all of them will die, which you do not want. Now, in order to save the life of these 5 people, you make a call to all the organ banks in the city, but nowhere you are able to find the organs available. Time is passing, you are desperate. No, I want to save these people. I don't want them to die. I don't want them to die. These 5 people. So what to do? What to do is you keep on thinking. Suddenly, suppose one young healthy man enters in your nursing home. You look at that person and say, problem solved. Now, this young man has come. So, you can say, so in this case, so that young man has come to take a vaccination from you. Now, you make him to lie on a bed, give an injection of anesthesia, cut him open and take 5 organs out of his body and save the life of these 5 people. You are still killing one person, but, well, you will be able to save the life of 5 people. How many of you will do that? In this case, perhaps virtually nobody ever agrees that I will do that. Very few times, sometimes some students say, sir, I can do that. But 99.99% of the people in this case will say that no, it cannot be done, it should not be done. Now think of it, in all the 3 cases, if you look at it, then in all the 3 cases, question is same. Question is same that your action of taking a right turn, your action of pushing the fat man, and your action of killing that young man and take his organ to save the life of 5 people, your action will lead to 1 person dead and 5 people saved. And your inaction, you don't do anything, you close your eyes and sit quietly, 1 person will be saved, but 5 people will be killed. Now in this case, why is it that in the first case you decided to act, take a right turn, and why is it that in the second and third case perhaps you decided to not take an action? That is where the question comes up. Just think of it, in the first trolley problem, if you decided to take a right turn, how long did you take to decide? Maybe a few seconds, not more than 5 or 10 seconds. So the moment question was there, that answer was already there in your mind. You just decided, okay sir, I will take a right turn. So it was appeared to be common sense. What else? This is what you perhaps thought. So it has to be done, taking a right turn. So in the first case, it appeared to be common sense. In the second case, the theory became very difficult to apply. In the third case, it became almost impossibly difficult. Shocking. Can you imagine a doctor doing that? So the idea, this is how ethics becomes more and more complicated as we proceed further. In the first case, it was simple. Second case, this was difficult. Third case, it became very, very difficult. That's why this theory that we have discussed, this theory is a general theory, but it is far from being universal. It cannot be applied perhaps in the second and perhaps in the third case. Definitely in the third case. So that is how ethics becomes more and more complicated as we go deeper into our understanding of right and wrong. So this is what we do in ethics, normally applied ethics. So this is what is the whole process. What we do here, that first of all we describe the morality of the people, then after we develop a theory, and then after we apply the theory. If the theory is applied well, then we accept that as a good theory. If the theory is not applied well, then we reject that theory maybe and we develop a better theory. Then again apply, develop a better theory. Again apply and develop a better theory. This is what we will be doing in our class also. So in each class, starting from tomorrow, each class we will discuss one important theory of ethics. Next class we will try to find a problem of that in applied domain. Then after we will develop a better theory, then again some problem, better theory, again problem, better theory, again problem. And towards the end of the course, we will try to develop a sort of universal theory of ethics that can help us to decide about right and wrong in every possible situation, whether personal life or professional life like civil service morality, against a political life like constitutional morality or international morality. At every stage, a single theory somehow should help us to decide about right and wrong. We will try to achieve that also in our later class. So that is how we are going to proceed further. Let me take some questions. Biswajit, I asked the 5% to leave the track. What do you think? Do you think that trolley is coming at high speed? And you can ask those people, but this time the trolley will do its job. You cannot ask, it is far away from that. Next question, in first case it will lead to least collateral damage. Same will be in the second and third case also. Least collateral damage, one person dead. So one person is dead in the first case also, second case also, and third case also. Why do you think that the first case is least collateral damage? Equal damage is there in all the three cases, one person dies. So that is how ethics is normally done, and this is what we will be doing in our class also. That is one important thing. Now, next important topic that we will try to talk about is, change the paragraph and then after write further. Next important topic, the domains of ethical, domains or sometimes we also call is base of ethical domains of ethical assessment. Domains of ethical assessment. Now, write down firstly, there are 4 domains of ethical assessment. There are 4 domains of ethical assessment. Four domains of ethical assessment. So that is the next important thing. In this section, what we are going to talk about is that whenever we make an assessment of ethics, then what is that area, that domain, that dimension on which assessment means what? Ethical assessment, assessment of right and wrong. So whenever we decide about right and wrong, then what is that basis on which we make decisions in our life? So if you look at moral philosophy, then almost any moral philosopher in the world, whenever they try to make an assessment of ethics, then they use one or more of these 4 areas, 4 domains. So we will discuss in some detail in today's class, more detail we will talk about in the later classes. Let us talk about 4 domains of ethical assessment. First one is, write down, consequence. First domain is called consequence. Write down firstly, according to some thinkers, no action is right or wrong. No action is right or wrong in itself. No action is right or wrong in itself. It becomes so on the basis of it becomes so on the basis of the consequence that it produces. It becomes so on the basis of the consequence that it produces. Now, this is the first way of understanding the ethics. The idea here is that according to such people, no action is right or wrong in itself. Nothing is right and nothing is wrong. So, if nothing is right and nothing is wrong, how do you decide? Well, depending on the consequence. That actions become right and wrong on the basis of the consequence that they produce. Suppose, for example, let's take an example. Suppose, for example, there are two choices in front of you, say A and B. And you have to make a decision what is right and what is wrong. Now, according to such thinkers, I will give you name of such thinkers, that according to such thinkers, well, looking at the action itself, you can never know what is right and what is wrong. Then how do you decide? Well, look at the consequence. If you do A, then suppose C1 is the consequence, and if you do B, then suppose C2 is the consequence. Every action has a consequence. Look at the consequence, and after that, compare the two consequences. If suppose, for example, C1 is better than C2, then that will imply that A is right and B is wrong. But in some special circumstances, sometimes maybe when C2 is better than C1, then that will imply that B becomes right and A becomes wrong. So, same action can become right on the basis of good consequence, and same action can become wrong also on the basis of bad consequence. So, action can become right and wrong depending on the consequence. Every action, even such actions like, for example, say, suppose this is the choice of speaking truth. Now, suppose this is the case of lying. Now, you have to decide whether to speak truth or to lie. Now, there are some philosophers like Gandhi, for example, Kant, we will talk about these philosophers also shortly. There are some philosophers like Gandhi who will say that truth is always right. You should always speak the truth, and lying is always wrong. But these philosophers that I am talking about right now, they will not agree with Gandhi. They will say that no, truth is normally right. But why truth is normally right? Because truth often creates good consequence. So, truth often has bad consequence, good consequence. Because of that, truth is normally good. But sometimes you can say, or lying is normally bad. Why lying is normally wrong? Because lying often creates bad consequence. So, because of that, lying is normally wrong. But in some special circumstances, well, if the consequence of truth is bad and consequence of lying is wrong, is good, then we can decide to lie also. So, that can become, so lying can also become right and truth can also become, well, wrong. Let's take one example, one case further. Think of it. Suppose, for example, there is an old lady, a very old lady, almost 85 years old, 90 years old. She is in a hospital and terminally ill. The doctor had said that her life is now over, her days are numbered. Maximum day after tomorrow, she is going to die. Now, she has a long and fulfilling life. So, everybody in the family and all around, well, they are waiting for her to die peacefully and get moksha, nirvana, whatever they get after the death. So, everybody is waiting for her to die peacefully. But suddenly, suppose today evening, a very unfortunate event happens in the life of that lady, that her younger son died in a road accident. Now, tomorrow morning, she asks you, suppose you are the caretaker of that lady in the hospital. Now, she asks you that where is my younger son? I have not seen him since yesterday evening. So, please ask him to come. I want to see everybody in my family before I die. Now, there are two choices in front of you. You can tell her the truth that your son is no more. And if you tell her the truth, then this lady who is even otherwise going to die, she will have a very painful death. The second choice in front of you is that you can lie to her. Lying is wrong, but in this case, if you lie to her, then, well, this lady who is even otherwise going to die tomorrow, she will have a comparatively peaceful death. Now, in this case, what do you think? What would you do? Would you speak truth or would you lie? Now, in this case, again, normal public study that has been done, 70% of the people prefer to lie. 30% people still decide to speak the truth. And in my class, also I have a similar data. 95% of my students in the class often prefer to lie. Not more than 5-6% the students say that I will speak the truth. What do you think? Now, if you think, for example, if you are among the majority of the people in the world, then perhaps you may prefer to lie. So, if you prefer to lie, then, well, such philosophers that we are talking about, now they will agree with you. They will say that, well, in this particular case, lying can become justified because consequence of lying is good. So, if the consequence is good, then even the case of lying can become right, and if the consequence is bad, then even truth can become wrong. This is what these people will say. Write down further. The theories based on consequence are called consequentialist theories, and the theories based on consequence are called consequentialist theories, and the most influential such theory is utilitarianism, developed by Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill. Developed by Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill. So, the idea here is that anybody who thinks about consequence as the basis of ethics, they are called consequentialist thinkers. And there are large number of such consequentialist thinkers are there in the world. But in modern time, the most influential consequentialist philosophy is called utilitarianism, which was developed by an extremely influential British philosopher called Jeremy Bentham and his student John Stuart Mill. So, we will talk about both of these two people in tomorrow's class. Bentham tomorrow and maybe Mill day after tomorrow. We will talk about both of these two people, who are these philosophers and what important role did they play in order to make us understand ethics in a proper manner. So, they are called consequence. If you look at consequence, then most of us are, by common sense, we are consequentialist. Because whenever some problem comes to us, our mind often goes to the consequence. Just think of those two cases, trolley problem. In the first trolley problem, suppose for example, this is the case of going straight and taking a right turn. Now, why did you decide in the first trolley problem, why did you decide to take a right turn? Well, you decided to take a right turn because you may have thought that if I go straight, then one person will be saved, but 5 people will be killed. And if I take a right turn, then one person may be saved, but one person will be killed, but 5 people will be saved. So, this is what you might have thought. So, in this case, this consequence appears to be better than that consequence. And because of that, perhaps you decided to take a right turn. So, by common sense, we are often consequentialist. Whenever we find some moral question, then our mind often goes into the domain of consequence. But remember, consequentialism is not always the best theory, because it did appear to be an appealing theory in the first trolley problem, but it did not appeal to us much in the second and the third case. Second and third case, we did not bother much about the consequence. We started thinking about something else. So, it is a commonsensical theory, but common sense is not always justified, is not always right. So, what are the other bases? Second one, write down. Second basis is called act. Write down firstly. According to some thinkers, some actions are always right, and some others are always wrong, and some others are always wrong regardless of their consequence. Some others are always wrong regardless of their consequence. Regardless of their consequence. Now, this is second way of understanding ethics. The idea here is that there are some people, I will give you the name of such people shortly, some of them. Yeah. Class will be from 5 o'clock. So, sorry. There are some philosophers, we will talk about these philosophers, I will give you some name of such philosophers shortly, that some actions according to these philosophers is always right, like truth for example. Truth is always right, whatever is the consequence. Even if the consequence is bad, then also we should always speak the truth. And some action like lying for example is always wrong, even if the consequence may be good. So they say that some actions are always right, like truthfulness for example, and some actions, there is something into the nature of the act itself which makes it right. And as a rational person, as a thinking person, we should identify that nature, and once you can identify that nature, then after, well, just do it, forget about the consequence. Consequence may be good sometimes, consequence may be bad sometimes. In either case, we should do that. Similarly, there is something into the nature of the act which makes it wrong. And as a rational person, as a thinking person, we should identify that nature, and then after, well, just don't do it, whatever may be the consequence of that. So according to these people, well, if you look at earlier the consequentialist thinkers, then according to them, consequentialist thinkers, well, this was the domain of ethical assessment. In order to make an assessment of ethics, we have to go into that area, that domain. But now these people will say that no, that is not the domain of ethical assessment. That is not something that we should bother, we should worry about. What is the domain of ethical assessment? It is this one. So right is always right regardless of the consequence. Wrong is always wrong regardless of the consequence. And our rationality, our thinking nature allows us to identify what is right, we should always do. What is wrong, we should never do. In India, if you look at it, the basic philosophy of Gita is like that. You must have heard that famous line of Gita, Karmanye vadhikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana. It is this type of philosophy. So, karma is my duty. Well, I must perform my action. Ma phaleshu kadachana. Phal is not for me to determine. Phal is what? Consequence. So, basic philosophy of Gita, the most central philosophy of Gita is that right is always right and wrong is always wrong, regardless of the consequence, phal, result of the action. This is what this philosophy essentially tells us. So, that is what these people will say. Write down further. According to them, these philosophers, according to them, there are two types of actions. According to them, there are two types of actions. First one, write down. There are two types of actions. First one is wrong act. Write down further. They are unethical acts. They are unethical or immoral acts. They are unethical or immoral acts and we should never do them. They are unethical or immoral acts and we should never do them. So this is the first type of action. Of course, wrong act name itself tells us that they are unethical, they are immoral act, we should never do them under whatever consideration all. The nature of the unethical act is such that if you do them, then you will be wrong, and if you don't do them, then you will be right. So ethics always creates certain prohibition of us. We are prohibited from doing those acts, we are barred from doing those acts. So this is the nature of the unethical act, immoral act. Then after, second type of act, write down. Right act. And write down further. There are two types of right actions. There are two types of right actions. First one, write down, obligatory acts. First one, obligatory acts. Write down, they are ethical or moral acts. They are ethical or moral acts and we must always do them. They are ethical or moral acts and we must always do them. We must always do them. So that is the first type of right action. Again we talk about two types of them. First is obligatory. Name itself tells they are obligation upon us. They are moral act, they are ethical acts. Nature of the moral act is such that if you do them, then you are right. And if you don't do them, then you will be wrong. It is just opposite of the complementary of the first type of action. So ethics always puts certain obligation upon us. Ethics always puts certain pressure upon. They are obligatory, they are mandatory act, they are necessary act, they are required. We must do them under any circumstances. In a way, these actions are our duty. So ethics always creates certain duty for us. So, and we must, as a thinking person, we should identify our duties, and once you know what our duties are, then we simply follow that, even if the consequence may be sometimes bad. So ethics always creates certain duty to us, and situations also determine our duty in ethics. Suppose, for example, in this classroom, all of you are acting like a student. So as a student, you have certain duties that you must perform. I, as a teacher, have certain duties that I must always perform regardless of the consequence. If you go out of the classroom, then your duties will change. At your home, you have a different set of duty as a brother, as a sister, as a son, as a daughter, later on as a husband or wife, mother, father. Tomorrow, if you become a civil servant, then you will have certain duty as a civil servant further, which you must perform, even if sometimes consequence may be bad for you or for others may be. So we must always perform our duty. They are mandatory, they are required act, they are ethics always creates certain obligation upon us, force upon us, that we are necessarily required to do such acts. They are called obligatory acts. Then there is a second type of right action also, write down, optional act. Write down, they are ethics neutral or amoral acts. They are ethics neutral or amoral acts. They are ethics neutral or amoral act, and it is our choice whether we do it or not. And it is our choice whether we do it or not. So that is the nature of the optional act. Again, name itself tells us it is permissible, it is optional. Nature of the optional act is such that if you do them, then you are right. And if you don't do them, then also you are right. There is no wrong into that. So they are neutral act, they are amoral. Mind the spelling here. They are immoral act, should never be done. Moral act must always be done. An immoral act, your choice whether you do it. If you do it, then also you are right. And if you don't do it, then also you are right. There is no wrong into that. So such acts are, remember these words because these are the important terminology that we have to use in many later classes as well. So they are immoral act, they are morally neutral act. Most of the, if you look at our day-to-day life, then majority of the action that we perform in our life, they are immoral by nature. Suppose for example, most of the things, suppose for example, you wear this cloth or that cloth, there is no morality into that. If you sit on this chair or that chair, well, both of them are equally right. So if you eat in your dinner, for example, tonight, if you eat pizza or not, well, eating pizza may be unhealthy, but it is not immoral as such. So it is not immoral. So idea here is that majority of the action that we perform in our day-to-day life, they are immoral by nature, they are immoral by character, they are morally neutral acts. But write down further. Difference between moral and immoral. Immoral is if you are not doing it, then it will become wrong. But immoral act, even if you don't do it, then also you are not wrong. So immoral acts are, well, nothing wrong is there. Both of them are equally right. It is your choice that you have. Change the paragraph and after write further. There is a special type of optional act. There is a special type of optional act. And change the paragraph then after write further. Supererogatory act. Supererogatory acts. Again, I write it again so that you can add a little tongue twister, but important word. Supererogatory. Supererogatory acts. So now before we write something, let us talk about supererogatory act by an example. Let's take one example of such an act. Suppose for example, there is a person called A. Anybody, a normal person like me, you or anybody. Now this person is doing a job in a good company, otherwise had a good family life, earns good money. So normal middle class person like any one of us. Now one day, suppose this person is approached by another person called B. So B is a person who comes to A and tells A that I belong to an NGO and our NGO is going to help some people who are the victim of some natural disaster. Suppose for example that say cyclone Amphan that was there a few last year, or second wave of COVID, or a few years ago there was a severe earthquake in Nepal, 7,000 people had died, or earthquake in Turkey, 50,000 people died. So he tells this first person that I belong to an NGO and our NGO is going to help those victims of the natural disaster who are living in very bad condition in the aftermath of the disaster. And for that we require some volunteers. So he requests A that please leave your job for a month, leave your family for a month, come with us, let us help those unfortunate victims of the natural disaster. Now suppose if this person refuses to go with that person, second person, would you call him a bad person? Of course not. He will be a normal person. That most of us will not. We do feel sorry about those people who die, but we don't live our life and go to help those people all the time. So most of us perhaps will refuse to such a request. So if he refuses to go with A, then we will not call him a bad person. But suppose for example, if this person is so moved by the plight and pain of those victims that he leaves his family for a month, he takes a leave without pay from his office for a month and goes with B to help those people, what would you call him? A mad person? Perhaps not. We will call him a highly ethical person. If he does so, then his action will become a supererogatory act. So supererogatory act is the one in which if you don't do them, then you are right. That's why it is optional act. There is no compulsion, there is no force on you, there is no mandatory act is there. So if you don't do it, then it is your choice. There is nothing wrong. But if you do them, then it will become highly ethical. Such acts are called supererogatory act. There is no obligation upon you to perform them. That's why if you don't do them, you will be right person. But if you do them, then you will become highly ethical person, highly moral person. Such acts are called supererogatory act. In every society, you know that there are some people, they go beyond. So this act, you can say, if you perform supererogatory act, then you don't perform your duty alone. There is no duty, there is no requirement. Such people, we can say, go sometimes far beyond the call of duty. So beyond call of duty is what we call the supererogatory act. So every society has some people who go beyond the call of the duty and they do something extraordinary, something extra, something more important, something, well, beyond the ordinary. Such people are often recognized by the society as heroes. Such people are often considered as hero in the society. Now, when I say hero, I don't mean the filmy hero, Salman Khan type. It is that they are the real heroes of life. So we often call them the heroes of life again. Think of it, Gandhi. Gandhi could be an example of a supererogatory person. Now, Gandhi could have lived his life like a normal person, lawyer. Would you have called him a bad person? Of course not. He would have been a normal person, but he made a lot of sacrifice in his personal life and he led a movement that led to the, well, India getting rid of many evils there. He became a supererogatory person, he became a hero and the whole world recognized India. In India, we call him the father of the nation because of that. The whole world considers him as one of the greatest personality of the 20th century. He became a superhero. Mother Teresa could be an example of that. Now, just imagine a situation, had Mother Teresa lived her life like a normal lady, would you have called her a bad lady? Of course not. That would have been a normal. But she made a lot of sacrifice in her personal life and, well, saved a large number of people, helped a large number of people whom nobody is willing to help. Now, she became a supererogatory person, she became a hero and the whole world recognized her for that. She was given Bharat Ratna, Nobel Prize, or you can see later on, the Catholic Church even gave her the sainthood, the highest, you can say, recognition by a church. So, she became a supererogatory person because of that. So, every society has some people who become supererogatory in their nature and society recognized. Not only society, a few years ago, there was a film, I hope that you remember that film, some of you may have seen that film. It was based on a real story of a girl called Neerja Bhanot. So I hope that you remember her story. Neerja Bhanot was an air hostess, and when her flight was hijacked, then once she got an opportunity, she could have saved herself first. But she did not do that. Most of us would have done that. Just imagine a situation, had she saved herself first, would you have called her a bad girl in that case? Of course not. She might have been considered as a normal girl, but she did not do that. That before saving herself, she tried to save every other passenger in the flight and she was able to save the life of 255 people. She died while doing that. But death is not a problem in ethics. Everybody has to die sometimes or the other. But before death, what you do in your life is what determines the quality of your life. People die. Some people die very young. You can say Bhagat Singh died at 23 years of age. But his life, was it a bad life? Adi Shankaracharya died at the age of 32. But was that a bad life? No. Dying young is not a problem in ethics. Dying before dying, what you do in your life is more important. Life should be, as Babu Moshai said in that film, Zindagi badi honi chahiye, lambi nahi. Life should be big, not long. There is a difference between long and big. So she led a big life in that case because she was able to perform the supererogatory act. She became a supererogatory person. So every society has some people like Gandhi or Mother Teresa or some common people also like Neerja who perform such act of supererogatory nature. Not only person, even every organization also has some people who often become supererogatory and all. And they are always recognized by the organization as a great person. Just think of it, who are the people in army who get Ashok Chakra or Paramveer Chakra, etc.? They are not the people who perform their duty. If you perform your duty, then you will get your salary, you will get your perks, you will get your incentive, you will not get Ashok Chakra. So those are the soldiers who go beyond the call of the duty and they perform some exceptional act of bravery. They are the ones who are given Ashok Chakra. They are the supererogatory people. So every society has, every organization has some supererogatory people, and society recognizes them, society awards them, society gives them a special status in general. They are considered to be the hero in the society. Now, one way to understand supererogatory person or act can be this also. Think of it. Suppose, for example, this is the rising standard of morality. This is the rising standard of morality. And suppose, for example, this is the normal standard of morality that we all are expected to follow, standard of duty. So in every society, we are expected to perform certain duty, that don't lie to others, don't cheat others, keep your promise, pay your taxes, stop at the red light, whatever you can see. These are the normal duty that we all are expected to follow. So people who do not follow the duty, they are unethical people. The people who are below the duty, they do not follow their duty, they are unethical people, they are immoral people, they are bad people, they are the criminals, they are often punished by the society, well, as a bad person. Most of us are normal people, we follow our duties, and the people who follow their duties, they are the good people. So we are normally good people because we follow our duties normally. Now there are some people, they do not simply follow their duty, they go to, let's call that as beyond duty. They go beyond duty. Now they are the people, they are the ones who become supererogatory people, they are the people who become heroes, they are the people, they do not remain good people, they become great. So there is a difference between being good and being great. If you follow your duty, then you will become good, and if you go beyond duty and do something extra, then you will become a great person maybe. So they are the people, they become great people. What is the importance of such people? Such people often raise the standard of morality that nobody else is willing to follow, and because of that they become an example for others to follow. And when a large number of people start following their example, then we can say that a standard of society has risen up like this one. Gandhi, for example, Gandhi presented himself as a high standard of morality in politics. How to do the politics with ethics? Earlier, politics and ethics was considered to be, well, antithetical to each other. But Gandhi showed to the world that no, politics can also be done ethically. So he raised the standard of politics in a way, and because of that, well, he became an example for a large number of people in the world to follow. And because of that, he became inspiration for such people, that how to fight injustice without being violent. Earlier it was thought that injustice can be fought only by killing the bad people. But he said that no, you don't have to kill the bad people, just by using non-violent methods also we can fight injustice and we can remove the wrong in the world. So he became an example and inspiration for a large number of people, like for example Nelson Mandela, Martin Luther King Jr., and a large number of people started following his example. He was a supererogatory person. And when a large number of people start following their example, then we can say the standard of society has risen up. This is how society becomes better and better. So we can possibly say that if you look at history of human civilization, one way to define the history of human civilization could be that history of human civilization is a rising standard of morality. So for last 5,000 years, you can see the standard of morality is rising up continuously maybe. And in that rising up of the standard, well, some people always take the first step. Just think of it. 300 years ago, sati was accepted standard of morality. People thought that sati is right. Today, sati has become wrong. Is there anything that has changed in sati as a practice? No. Sati has not changed. We have become better. Because of that, sati that was acceptable yesterday became unacceptable today. Because we have become better, we have become higher in that standard. So that is what. So this is how society often becomes better and better as time passes. In that betterment of the society, some people always take the first step. They are the ones who become the supererogatory people. So finally, we can see that there are 4 types of actions are there. That wrong action, immoral act should never be done. Moral act must always be done, our duty. Third is amoral act, it is your choice whether you do it or not. And finally, supererogatory act, that still is your choice, but these actions provide you an opportunity to become great. Every society gives us an opportunity to become great. Some people avail that opportunity, they become heroes. Most of the people do not avail that opportunity, they remain good people. So these are the 4 types of action. In our later classes, we will discuss all of them. We will discuss ethics of immoral act also. How can we know that which acts are immoral, that we should never do? We will discuss ethics of duty also, that how can we identify our duty. We will discuss ethics of immorality also, that how can we understand the neutral acts. And finally, we will discuss also the ethics of heroism, ethics of supererogatory acts also. So all of these things we will discuss in our later classes in more detail. So according to the action based theory, these are the 4 types of actions. Let's take a few questions out there before we end the classroom. If there will be such case, then I will hit those 5 people with the help of some piece of some stone generally found in mountainous areas, and they will understand and go out from the track. Pinto, don't assume that. I told you there are no assumption, only these 2 choices are there. We'll talk about that later on. Subrata, what is the difference between moral and immoral? I hope it would be clear to you now. Biswajit, sir, in Uttar Pradesh, since few months, we see several encounter had done. Is it right or wrong? We'll discuss that in a later class, Biswajit. We'll talk about all these questions through the course later on. So we'll discuss that later. So that is it for today. We'll stop at it here. Tomorrow we will talk about the next 2 important other types of actions. So that is it for today. Tomorrow we'll see you again.